"I only have $3.14, the stranger said, opening his rain-darkened palm beneath the chandelier light. "Is that enough for soup?" 3/4, 2 dimes, 4 pennies, and 2 crumpled dollar bills rested against his skin while water slid from his coat onto the polished floor. Claire Bennett stopped with a tray balanced against her shoulder. At the nearest table, a woman lowered her wineglass. Someone farther back gave a short, embarrassed laugh. The stranger did not turn toward it. He kept his hand extended, not begging, not apologizing, simply waiting for an answer that no one seemed willing to give. Claire looked at the coins, then at the brass service clock above the kitchen doors. Her section was full. Table 6 had been waiting on entrees for 12 minutes. A dessert flame trembled at the edge of her tray. Behind the host's stand, manager Daniel Mercer lifted 2 fingers and pointed toward the entrance. The gesture was small. Clear. Send him back into the rain. Claire's grip tightened beneath the tray. A folded envelope peeked from her apron pocket, softened at the corners from being opened too many times. When she shifted, it slipped halfway out. She caught it against her hip before it fell, pressed it deeper into the pocket, and looked again at the man. He had arranged the coins from largest to smallest across his palm. Claire's eyes paused on that careful line. Without seeming to notice, she reached down and straightened the soup spoon at the empty two-top beside her in the same descending angle. The stranger saw it. Something in his face changed, not surprise, exactly, but recognition held behind stillness. Daniel pointed at the door again. This time his jaw hardened. The rain struck the front windows in silver sheets. A gust pushed through the imperfect seal, stirring the paper menu on the host's stand. The stranger closed his fingers around the money. "It is all right," he said. "I should not have come in." He turned before anyone had to refuse him aloud. Claire moved. The dessert flame died as she set the tray on a passing server station. Table 6 called her name. Daniel stepped from behind the host's stand. "Claire." She heard the warning in it. Missing an order could cost her the shift. Defying him could cost more. Her hand touched the envelope in her apron once, just once, then fell away. The stranger reached the door. Claire crossed the dining room and placed herself between him and the rain. He stopped close enough for her to see that his coat was old but carefully repaired, each stitch dark and exact. His eyes moved to her apron pocket, then back to her face. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice low enough that the room had to lean into the silence, "you asked whether it was enough." Daniel came up behind her. "Claire, return to your section." She did not look back. The stranger opened his hand again, the coins still ordered with almost ceremonial precision. Claire folded his fingers over them. For 1 second, neither of them moved. The gesture left something between them that had not existed when he walked in, not trust, not yet, but the dangerous beginning of obligation. Daniel's voice sharpened. "Last warning." Claire released the man's hand, turned toward the empty table, and pulled out the chair. "Keep your money," she said. "Sit down." The stranger studied her as the entire restaurant waited to see which of them would move first. Then he sat, and Claire picked up the menu, choosing him over her manager, her tables, and whatever waited inside the worn envelope against her heart. Claire placed the menu in front of him, but the stranger did not open it. "Soup is enough," he said. His voice was quiet, almost careful, as though asking for more would turn her decision into charity. Claire glanced toward table 6. 3 untouched water glasses. 1 raised hand. Daniel stood beside the host station, writing something on a small yellow slip. She knew what that meant before he tore it from the pad. A formal warning. One more mistake tonight, and the envelope in her apron would matter sooner than she had planned. Still, she reached for the stranger's wet coat. "May I hang this somewhere warm?" He hesitated. His fingers closed around the collar, protective rather than embarrassed. Then he released it. "Thank you." The coat was heavier than it looked. Claire carried it behind the service partition and hung it beside the kitchen vent, choosing the only place where the heat would reach without damaging the fabric. When she returned, he had straightened the spoon beside his bowl setting. Not parallel to the knife. Slightly lower. Largest piece to smallest, the same precise descending line as the coins. Claire adjusted the salt and pepper shakers to match without thinking. His gaze lifted. This time, the recognition in it lasted long enough to become a question. "You do that often?" he asked. "Do what?" "Put things in order before the room gets loud." Claire looked toward table 6. "The room is already loud." A faint movement touched the corner of his mouth, then disappeared. Daniel arrived with the yellow slip folded once between 2 fingers. "Your section is backing up." He placed it beside Claire's order pad. "You can serve him or keep your shift. You cannot neglect paying guests for both." The stranger lowered his eyes to the slip. Claire picked it up before he could read more. For a second, her thumb covered the manager's signature. Then she tucked the warning beneath the worn envelope in her apron. "I will handle my tables." "You said that 12 minutes ago." Daniel looked at the man, not unkindly, but with the practiced distance of someone protecting margins. "We can package something to go." The stranger reached for his coins. Claire stopped him with one hand on the table, not touching him, only closing the path between his money and the edge. "Please do not make my choice smaller so it becomes easier for everyone else." Daniel's face tightened. The stranger's hand remained still. He studied Claire as if the sentence had cost more than the soup. "Claire," Daniel said, "table 6." She turned. The couple there had begun gathering their coats. Losing them would mean losing the tip, perhaps the shift, perhaps more. Claire took one step toward them. Behind her, the stranger spoke. "Let me leave." She stopped. "Then you can keep what you have." His fingers brushed the coins again. "And you can keep what you need." Claire looked back at him. For the first time, his composure slipped. Only slightly. His thumb pressed against the smallest penny until the edge whitened his skin. She could let him go and repair the damage. No one would blame her. He would return to the rain with his dignity intact. She would return to the rules with hers uncertain. Claire crossed to table 6, apologized without excuses, offered to have their meals packed at no charge, and handed the couple her own staff meal voucher for another evening. They left without smiling, but they left without asking for Daniel. The voucher had been meant for the next day. Claire returned to the stranger's table with one clean napkin and placed it beneath the spoon he had aligned. "You are staying," she said. He looked at the empty doorway, then at the warning hidden in her apron. "Why?" Claire met his eyes. "Because you asked for food, not forgiveness." The kitchen bell rang. She brought him a bowl of soup, then set a small piece of bread beside it. Not a basket. Not enough to embarrass him. Just enough to say she had noticed. The stranger placed one coin, the smallest penny, on the napkin between them. "Then keep this," he said. "Not as payment." Claire did not reach for it. "What is it?" "A promise that I will not forget the cost." She should have refused. Instead, she closed her fingers around the penny, and in doing so accepted something heavier than gratitude, the first fragile measure of his trust, and the responsibility of deciding what she would do with it. Claire noticed the stranger had not touched the soup. Steam curled past his face while his right hand remained closed beneath the table. "Too hot?" she asked. He shook his head. Claire did not press him. She placed a glass of warm water beside the bowl instead of the ice water already there, then folded a dry service towel and set it within reach of his rain-reddened fingers. Only then did he bring his hand into the light. It trembled once before he wrapped it around the glass. Claire looked away quickly, giving him the privacy of not being watched while accepting help. Across the room, Daniel removed her name from the section board. He drew a hard line through it, reassigned her tables, and handed the yellow warning to the assistant manager. Claire saw the movement reflected in the dark window but kept her attention on the stranger. She tore the bread into 2 smaller pieces, leaving the crust intact so it would not look prepared for someone unable to manage it. He noticed. "You watch people closely," he said. "It keeps coffee from going cold." "That is not what I meant." Claire adjusted the bowl so the handle of the spoon faced his steadier hand. Her fingers paused when the worn envelope in her apron pressed against the table edge. She stepped back before he could see her expression. "Eat before it cools." He lifted the spoon, tasted the broth, and studied her over its rim. "You gave away your meal voucher." Claire glanced toward Daniel. "You heard that?" "I hear what people say when they think I do not matter." The words carried no self-pity. That made them harder to answer. Claire took the empty sugar bowl from his table, filled it from the service station, and returned it even though he had not asked. "Then you know listening does not always mean understanding." For the first time, he lowered his gaze. His thumb moved over the edge of the glass, tracing a small circle. Claire recognized the motion because she did the same thing against the envelope whenever Daniel discussed reduced hours. She stopped herself from touching her pocket. The stranger broke 1 piece of bread in half and set the untouched portion on the napkin. "Sit for a moment." "I cannot." "Because of him?" Claire followed his eyes to Daniel. "Because other people are working harder now." Instead of defending herself, she collected 2 abandoned plates from a nearby table and carried them to the kitchen. On the way back, she caught a server before a tray tilted, steadied 3 glasses with her wrist, and quietly switched 1 plate after noticing a nut garnish on an order marked for an allergy. No announcement. No praise. The server whispered thanks and hurried on. The stranger watched Claire return to him with the same calm expression, though a faint red mark had appeared across her wrist where the hot plate had touched her. "You saw the garnish from across the room," he said. Claire wrapped the towel once around her wrist. The ticket had a blue corner. Most people would have missed it. Most people were busy. His eyes narrowed, not in disbelief but in renewed caution. "You make excuses for everyone." "Not everyone." Daniel approached carrying the time-sheet. He laid it on the table between them. Claire's remaining shifts had been crossed out. "Go home after he finishes," he said. "We will discuss whether you still work here tomorrow." The stranger set down his spoon. The room seemed to contract around the sound. Claire could have blamed him. She could have let his anger defend her. Instead, she covered the time-sheet with her hand. "This is between my manager and me." "Your choice involved me," the stranger said. "That does not make my consequences yours." The answer changed something in his face. Until then, he had watched her like a man testing the strength of an unfamiliar bridge. Now he looked at her as though he had discovered she would rather let it break beneath her than push someone else into the river. Daniel turned away, satisfied that the punishment had landed. Claire removed her hand from the schedule. The stranger placed the untouched half of the bread beside the penny she had accepted. "Take it," he said. "You gave away tomorrow's meal." Claire hesitated, then sat for exactly 1 breath and ate the bread. Not because she wanted his pity, but because refusing would make his kindness worth less than hers. When she stood, he no longer looked like a customer receiving mercy. He looked like someone who had been permitted to give something back. Then Daniel called from the host stand, "Claire, your shift is over." Claire untied her apron. The worn envelope slipped free and landed beside the stranger's bowl. Before she could reach it, he saw the red final notice stamped across the front. Claire snatched it up, but the distance between them had already changed. He now knew her kindness had not come from abundance, and she knew he had seen exactly what it might cost her. Claire folded the final notice twice and returned it to her apron, but the stranger's eyes stayed on the pocket as though the paper had spoken louder than she ever would. Daniel unlocked the side door and held it open. "Your shift is over." Claire took the stranger's coat from beside the kitchen vent. The fabric had warmed, though the cuffs were still damp. She laid it across the empty chair instead of handing it to him. "Finish the soup," she said. Daniel gave a tired laugh. "She does not work here anymore tonight." The stranger looked at Claire. "Do you always stay where you are no longer wanted?" She should have walked out. The warning had already cost her tomorrow's meal, her tables, and perhaps the only job standing between her and the red notice. Instead, she pulled the chair opposite him back into place. "Only when leaving would make someone else pay for my choice." Daniel let the side door close. He did not argue again. He simply removed Claire's employee card from the rack and slipped it into his pocket before returning to the office. The click of the lock transferred the weight of the room. Claire was no longer serving the stranger. She was choosing to remain with him. He lifted another spoonful of soup, then asked, "If you had enough money to fix what is in that envelope, would you still work here?" Claire wiped a drop of water from the table with the edge of the towel. "Yes." "Why?" "Because needing less does not make other people need less." He watched her carefully. "And if you had more money than you could spend?" "I would still notice when someone was cold." His fingers tightened around the spoon. The movement was small, but the metal touched the bowl with a sharp sound. Claire looked at his repaired cuff, then at the careful stitches along the shoulder of his coat. "You mend things instead of replacing them," she said. "Sometimes replacement costs more than money. Sometimes repair does too." He lowered the spoon. For the first time, the control in his face thinned. His eyes moved toward the empty chair beside him, not Claire, not the door, an absence he seemed accustomed to carrying. She did not ask who belonged there. She placed the untouched half of bread on a small plate and moved it into the empty space. His gaze returned to her. "Why did you do that? No one should have to keep looking at an empty place while they eat." The answer left him still. Then he reached into his coat and removed the remaining coins. He arranged them again from largest to smallest, but this time he left a gap where the penny Claire held should have been. Claire noticed. She took the penny from her apron and placed it in the space. The line became complete. Neither of them smiled, but the table changed. "If you lost everything tomorrow," he asked, "what would you protect first?" Claire looked toward Daniel's office, where her employee card had disappeared. "The part of me that knows why I lost it." That is not an answer. It is the only one that keeps loss from deciding who you become. He leaned back, studying her with renewed suspicion. "You speak as though you have practiced." Claire's hand moved toward the envelope, then stopped short. "Everyone practices something." "And what do you practice?" "Not becoming cruel when it would be easier." The stranger's expression hardened, not at her, but at something the words had touched. He folded his napkin once, then again, each edge exact. "Suppose someone offered to solve your problem," he said. "Not for free. Nothing worth having is free. Suppose the price was that you could never pretend not to see what they carry." Claire looked at the empty chair, the repaired coat, the trembling hand now held perfectly still. This was no longer a question about money. It was an invitation into the burden behind his silence. "I would ask whether they wanted help," she said, "or permission." His eyes lifted sharply. The restaurant noise seemed to recede. "And if they did not know?" Claire placed the completed row of coins back into his palm and closed his fingers over them. "Then I would stay until they chose." Daniel returned carrying Claire's coat and set it on the host stand. You need to leave now. Claire stood, but the stranger caught the edge of the final notice as it slipped from her apron again. He did not read the address. He only saw the deadline printed beneath the red stamp, 9 o'clock the next morning. He released the paper at once, preserving the dignity she had protected for him. Then he made his first request that was not about soup. "Come back here tomorrow at 8:30, he said. Claire glanced at Daniel, at her employee card in his pocket, then at the man who had finally allowed her to see the weight behind his questions. "Why?" "Because before that notice becomes your future, I need you to witness a decision I have avoided making." Claire knew agreeing would close the last easy escape. She folded the notice, buttoned her coat, and said, "I will be here." At 8:29 the next morning, Claire stood outside the locked restaurant with the final notice in her coat pocket and the stranger's penny pressed inside her glove. Victor was already there beneath the awning, wearing the same repaired coat, the rain gone but the cold still caught in its seams. He had arranged the remaining coins along the stone ledge from largest to smallest, leaving one empty space. Claire placed the penny into it without a word. Only then did he look at her. "You came. I said I would." Daniel unlocked the door and froze when he saw them together. Before he could speak, a black sedan pulled to the curb. Grant Whitmore, one of the restaurant's wealthiest regulars, stepped out while finishing a phone call. He glanced at Victor's coat, the coins, and Claire standing beside him. His expression sharpened with amusement. "You brought him back." Daniel lowered his voice. "Claire no longer represents this restaurant." Grant entered anyway, removing his gloves finger by finger. "Good. Then she can explain why breakfast service now includes panhandling." Victor gathered the coins slowly. Claire saw his hand tremble once before closing around them. Grant saw it too. $3 again, he asked. "That bought you dinner. You should have invested the miracle." Daniel opened the office door and motioned Claire inside. On the desk lay her employee card and a fresh schedule. "I can restore your shifts," he said quietly. "Tell him to leave. Apologize to Mr. Whitmore. We end this here." Claire looked through the glass wall. Victor stood alone beneath the chandelier while Grant spoke loudly enough for the kitchen staff to hear. "People like you always find someone soft enough to reward the performance." Victor did not answer. He only moved the smallest coin into the empty place where Claire's penny had been, as though returning the line to order without taking back what she had given him. Daniel slid the employee card toward her. "You need this job." Claire touched the red notice through her pocket. Then she looked at the card. One choice protected her home. The other protected a man who had asked for nothing except a bowl of soup and the right not to be reduced by it. She picked up the card. Daniel exhaled. Claire carried it into the dining room and placed it on the table between Grant and Victor. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "he never asked anyone to believe he was important." Grant smiled. "That is because he is not." Claire turned the card over so her name disappeared. "Neither was I yesterday, until treating him like a person became inconvenient." The smile left Grant's face. "Careful." "I am being careful." Her voice remained low. "You are measuring what he can pay. Daniel is measuring what I can cost. Neither of you has asked what kind of place this becomes when dignity is only served to people who can afford it." Daniel stepped forward. "Claire, take the card and stop." Victor finally spoke. "Do not lose your work for me." Claire looked at him. Until that moment, she had believed his questions were tests meant to expose weakness. Now she saw the truth in the way he refused to let her sacrifice herself. He had not come looking for kindness. He had come expecting proof that kindness always had a price, and he was prepared to leave before she paid it. Claire pushed the employee card back toward Daniel. "Then do not make my choice meaningless by pretending it was yours." Victor's eyes lowered to the coins. He opened his hand and placed them beside her card, but he left the penny in Claire's possession. Grant laughed once. This is absurd. Victor looked at him with a stillness that changed the room before anyone understood why. No, he said. This is expensive. Claire reached for her employee card, snapped it cleanly in half, and set both pieces beside the coins. Daniel went pale. Grant stared. Victor did not move for several seconds. Then he removed the untouched half of bread he had wrapped from the night before and placed it in Claire's hand. She accepted it. Not as charity. Not as repayment. As proof that the burden between them now belonged to both. Claire had chosen his dignity over her safety. Victor closed his fingers over the broken card and made his own irreversible choice. You wanted to know what decision I avoided, he said. I will make it now, but after this, neither of us gets to return to the life we had yesterday. Victor looked at the broken employee card in his hand, then placed both halves beside the coins. The decision is simple, he said. I leave before anyone loses more because of me. Claire's face changed, but she did not reach for him. That is not a decision, she said. That is an exit. Grant Whitmore gave a quiet laugh. Finally, something sensible. Daniel moved toward the table, relieved by the possibility of ending the scene without losing a wealthy customer. Mr. Whitmore, breakfast is on us. Claire, collect your things. Victor rose. The repaired coat settled over his shoulders, and the authority in his posture seemed almost impossible beside the few coins still on the table. Claire stepped into his path. You asked me to witness a choice. You did. No. I watched you make me responsible for your retreat. His eyes hardened. You have already lost enough. You do not get to protect my dignity by deciding what I can afford. The words landed harder than accusation. Victor looked at the final notice in her pocket, then at Daniel, who held the restaurant's future schedule in one hand and Claire's livelihood in the other. If I stay, Victor said, he loses a customer. You lose the chance to work here again. And every person in this room will believe you chose me because you expected something. Claire glanced at Grant. He had already lifted his phone. She did, he said. And people should know what kind of judgment this place rewards. Daniel's expression tightened. Put the phone away. Grant turned the screen toward him. A drafted message showed the restaurant's name above a photograph of Claire standing beside Victor. Daniel lowered his voice. Claire, apologize now, and I can still contain this. Claire looked at Victor. Leaving with him would protect his dignity but confirm Grant's story. Staying would preserve the restaurant's reputation by allowing Daniel to make Victor the problem. Both choices demanded someone be reduced. She took the penny from her glove and placed it back into the empty space among the coins. Then neither of us gives him the ending he wants. Victor's gaze dropped to the completed line. What are you choosing? I am staying long enough to say this clearly. Claire turned toward Grant's raised phone. He asked whether $3.14 could buy soup. I refused his money. Everything after that was our choice, not his deception. Grant's smile thinned. You are defending a stranger who has cost you your job. I am taking responsibility for the job I chose to risk. Daniel stepped closer. And the restaurant? Claire looked at him. You can protect the restaurant without teaching everyone here that poverty is misconduct. For one breath, Daniel had no answer. Victor saw it. Claire had won the room's silence, but Grant immediately used it. He pressed send. Daniel's phone vibrated almost at once. Then another server's. Then the assistant manager's. The photograph was already moving beyond them. Daniel stared at the screen. You cannot come back, he said. Claire's fingers closed around the edge of the table, but she nodded. No argument. No plea. Victor picked up the broken employee card. You should not have done that. Neither should you. Done what? Made leaving look like sacrifice when it was also fear. The control in his face finally cracked. Not anger. Recognition. Claire had seen the wound beneath the questions, and now he knew she would not let him hide inside generosity. Victor placed the card beside the bread she still held. Then keep one thing from this morning. Claire pushed it back. No. Carry the cost of what you asked me to witness. He closed his hand around the pieces. The choice altered him more than staying could have. He turned toward the door without revealing who he was, without defending himself, and without offering rescue. Claire let him go because stopping him would turn trust into possession. Outside, he paused beneath the awning. And looked back once. She lifted the penny between two fingers. He answered with the smallest nod, then disappeared down the block. Daniel locked the door behind him. Claire stood on the wrong side of her former workplace while Grant's post spread across the city. Only later, when Daniel reviewed the security footage, did he notice what the dining room had missed. Before Victor stepped into the rain, 3 black SUVs had been waiting across the street, engines running, and every man inside had remained motionless until he chose to walk away alone. By 9 the next morning, 10 black SUVs filled the curb outside the restaurant, and Claire stood across the street with the final notice in her pocket, watching every employee inside stop moving. Doors opened in sequence. Men in dark suits stepped onto the sidewalk and waited without speaking. No one entered. No one needed to. Daniel came outside first, his face drained of color. Grant followed with his phone already raised, but the nearest man looked at the screen once, and Grant lowered it without being told. Claire remained beneath the awning of the closed pharmacy next door. She could have walked away. The notice gave her less than an hour to prevent eviction, and whatever waited inside the restaurant no longer belonged to her. Then Victor stepped from the last SUV wearing the same repaired coat. No expensive suit. No polished transformation. Only the coat, the careful stitches, and Claire's broken employee card held between 2 fingers. The men around him shifted when he moved, but Victor looked only at Claire. You should be handling your notice, he said. You should not have come back. I said I would make the decision. And I said leaving was not one. Daniel heard them and looked from Victor to the line of vehicles. Sir, whatever misunderstanding occurred, we can resolve it privately. Victor did not answer him. He held out the broken card to Claire. She took one half but left the other in his hand. The small refusal stopped him more effectively than any accusation. Grant found his voice. This spectacle does not change what happened. She damaged the restaurant's reputation. I posted what I saw. You posted what made you feel taller, Claire said. Grant's expression hardened. And now everyone will see what kind of people she brings here. He turned his phone toward the gathered staff. The photograph had spread far beyond the restaurant. Comments called Claire reckless, manipulative, unstable. Daniel's name appeared beside demands that he fire her permanently. His employees watched him, frightened for their jobs. He looked at Claire with something worse than anger, need. Say you misjudged the situation, he whispered. Say you acted alone. I can protect the staff if this ends with you. Claire looked through the glass at the kitchen team she had worked beside for 2 years. If Daniel defended her, Grant's campaign could cost them shifts, suppliers, perhaps the restaurant itself. If she accepted blame, she would lose the last chance to challenge what had been done to Victor. Both deserved protection. Victor stepped closer. I can end this. Claire saw the change in the suited men before he finished. One reached for a phone. Another moved toward Grant. Victor's power could silence the post, frighten the room, restore her job, perhaps even solve the notice. It could also turn her kindness into proof that she had chosen the right man to impress. She placed the penny in Victor's palm and closed his fingers around it. "Do not use me to become the man they already fear." His face went still. The sentence struck deeper than Grant's insults because it came from the person whose opinion had begun to matter. Victor opened his hand. The penny lay beside the broken card, the two objects that had come to represent what they had built, trust given freely, and a cost neither could erase. "Then what do you want me to do?" he asked. Claire looked at Daniel. "Keep the restaurant open. Keep them employed. Tell the truth about what happened. But do not save me." Daniel stared at her. Grant smiled, believing he had won. Claire removed the final notice from her pocket, tore it cleanly in half, and placed the pieces on the hood of the nearest SUV. The last safe version of her life ended with that sound. Victor's hand closed around the penny. "You will lose your home. Then I lose it without selling you back your dignity." He looked at her as though she had taken away the only language of protection he knew. Around them, the men waited for his command. He gave none. Instead, he handed the broken employee card to Daniel. "Tell them she acted alone," Victor said. Claire's eyes lifted sharply. For one terrible second, she thought he had abandoned her. Then he added, "And tell them I was the one who failed to deserve it." Grant's smile vanished. Victor turned toward the SUVs. Claire caught his sleeve. "Where are you going?" He looked at her hand, then at her face. "To choose whether power can protect something without owning it." He gently removed her fingers from his coat. The distance between them became permanent in that moment. Claire had refused rescue, and Victor had lost the right to offer it on his terms. He stepped into the lead vehicle. Before the door closed, Claire saw him place the penny in the empty space among his coins. Then the convoy pulled away, leaving her job gone, her home nearly lost, and the only person who understood the price of her choice driving toward a decision that could either honor what she had taught him, or destroy it. The convoy returned before noon, but Victor did not step out first. The men in dark suits entered the restaurant carrying no threats, only folders, phones, and copies of Grant's post beside the security footage Daniel had saved. One folder went to Daniel. One went to Grant. One remained unopened on the table where Victor had eaten soup. Claire watched from the sidewalk, her suitcase beside her and the torn final notice folded inside her coat. She had already lost the apartment. There was nothing left for anyone to rescue in time. Then Victor crossed the street alone. The repaired coat was gone. He wore a dark suit now, severe and perfectly fitted, but the same coins rested in his open palm, arranged from largest to smallest with one empty space. The room recognized him before Claire did. Daniel lowered his eyes. Grant took one step backward. Every suited man stood when Victor entered. No one said the title aloud. They did not need to. Victor Hale was the name whispered through businesses that survived by knowing which doors never to close. The poor stranger had never been poor. The trembling hand, the repaired coat, the $3.14, none of it had been an accident. Yet Claire did not look at the men waiting for his command. She looked at the empty space among the coins. Victor stopped in front of her and placed the broken employee card on the table. Beside it, he set the untouched half of bread, still wrapped in the napkin from the first night. Then he opened the folder he had kept closed. Inside was no check, no deed, no offer of ownership. It held a written statement signed by Victor accepting responsibility for the disruption, confirming that Claire had not known who he was, and refusing any retaliation against the restaurant, its staff, or Grant. Daniel read it twice. Grant reached for the folder, but Victor covered it with one hand. "You wanted the room to believe she helped me because of what I could give her," he said. His voice never rose. "So I will give her nothing she did not choose." Grant's face tightened. You expect anyone to believe this was some moral lesson? Victor looked at Claire, not him. No, he removed his phone and placed it face down. Around the room, the other men did the same. Power, for once, was being set aside instead of displayed. Victor took the smallest penny from his pocket and held it between two fingers. Claire reached into her glove and found nothing. She had forgotten she had returned it to him. He placed the penny in the empty space among the coins, completing the line. Then he moved the entire row toward her. Claire did not take it. Victor's hand remained there, exposed and still. The meaning arrived without explanation. He had arranged the coins that way because order was the only thing he trusted when people became dangerous. Claire had mirrored the pattern before she knew who he was. She had completed it without asking for power, repayment, or proof. The connection had never been the coins. It was the first place either of them had been allowed to be careful without being judged for what that care concealed. Claire took the penny and left the rest. Victor's fingers closed over the unfinished line. Something in his face gave way. Not defeat. Relief. Yesterday, he said, you stopped me from protecting you by owning the outcome. Claire held the penny against her palm. And today? Victor turned to Daniel and handed him the signed statement. Today I protect what she protected. Daniel looked toward the kitchen staff. Grant's post had already begun collapsing under the full footage, the missing context, and his own words. No threat was needed. His choices had carried their own verdict. Victor faced Claire again. Your home is gone. She nodded. He did not offer another. Instead, he placed the restaurant's spare key, taken from Daniel with permission, beside the bread. There is a morning shift tomorrow, Daniel said quietly. Only if you still want it. Claire looked at the broken card, the key, and Victor. Returning would not restore what she had lost. Accepting would not erase the price. She picked up the key. Victor's eyes lowered, almost grateful. Claire then placed the penny back into his hand and closed his fingers around it. Keep the promise, she said. For the first time, Victor did not ask what it would cost. He simply nodded. The restaurant was safe. Grant's power was broken by the truth he had tried to control. Claire had work again, but no home to return to. Victor had honored her dignity, but the distance she had demanded still remained. As she turned toward the kitchen, he spoke her name. Claire stopped, one hand on the door. Tomorrow, Victor said, may I come back for soup? She looked at the empty chair beside his old table, then at the man who had finally learned how to ask without commanding. Come with $3.14, she said, and walked inside before either of them could pretend the answer meant less than it did. The next morning, Victor returned with $3.14 arranged from largest to smallest in his open palm. Claire stood inside the restaurant wearing a new employee card clipped beneath the same worn apron. The red notice was gone from her pocket, but the shape of it remained in a careful way. She folded her coat over the back of a chair instead of hanging it in the staff room. She had spent the night in the small apartment above the restaurant, offered by Daniel as temporary housing from an unused office conversion. It was not her home. Nothing in it carried her history. Still, when Victor entered, she did not hide the suitcase beneath the host stand. She let it remain visible. He saw it and said nothing. That silence was different now. It did not protect distance. It protected choice. Daniel approached before Claire could. He looked at the coins, then at Victor's face. For a moment, the old caution returned. Then Daniel picked up a menu and led him to the same table without asking whether he could pay. Soup, he said. Victor nodded. Daniel placed the menu down and straightened the spoon into a descending angle. Claire noticed. So did Victor. Neither corrected him. Across the room, a new server hesitated beside an elderly woman counting coins into her palm. Claire watched the young man glance toward the prices, then toward Daniel. Daniel did not speak. He simply turned one empty bowl upright on the service counter. The server understood. He carried soup to the woman and placed the receipt beneath the bowl, blank except for the words, "Paid forward." Claire lowered her eyes for 1 second, allowing the moment to pass without praise. Victor sat with the empty chair beside him. Claire brought one bowl of soup, one piece of bread, and a second spoon. She set the spoon at the empty place. Victor looked at it, then at her. Claire did not move it away. "Someone joining you?" she asked. His hand rested over the coins. In part 1, he would have closed his fingers and guarded the answer. Now he slid the penny out of line and placed it beside the second spoon. "Not today," he said. Claire sat for exactly 1 breath, as she had before, and broke the bread in half. She left one piece beside him and carried the other toward the elderly woman. Victor watched her go, but he did not follow, command, or offer to solve what she had lost. Instead, he removed a folded paper from his coat and placed it beneath the coins. It was not a check. It was a lease application for the apartment above the restaurant, bearing Claire's name and a blank signature line. Daniel had prepared it at fair rent, with terms she could accept or refuse. Victor had paid nothing. He had only asked whether such a choice could exist. Claire returned, read the page, and looked at him. "You did not sign it for me. You taught me not to." She took the pen, but her hand paused above the line. The apartment would never replace the home she had lost. Accepting it meant admitting that some doors did not reopen. Victor did not rush her. He turned the coin so the empty space faced her. Claire signed. Not because he had rescued her, but because he had finally learned how to leave room for her decision. She placed the penny into the gap, completing the line one last time, then pushed all $3.14 back toward him. "Keep it," she said. "For the next person who asks." Victor closed his hand around the coins, but only after placing the penny aside. He left it on the table between them. By noon, Grant's reserved corner table had been removed from the floor plan. No announcement was made. No one celebrated. His absence became smaller each day, while the blank receipts multiplied quietly beneath bowls of soup. Near closing, Victor stood to leave. Daniel handed him his repaired coat, cleaned and warmed by the kitchen vent. Victor ran his thumb across the dark stitches, then placed the coat over the shoulders of a man waiting outside in the cold. Claire watched through the rain-streaked window as Victor returned to the curb without it. The black SUVs waited across the street, but he did not signal them. He walked beneath the awning alone, carrying nothing visible except the coins in one hand. Inside, Claire found the penny still resting beside the second spoon. She lifted it, crossed to the front window, and placed it on the ledge where the chandelier light could reach it. $3.13 disappeared into the rain with Victor. One penny remained inside, no longer payment, promise, or debt, but proof that two people had learned how to give without owning what came next.